Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of something on Iraq. Um, Jon Stewart just figured this out. The comedian. He just figured out that China was the biggest benefactor of the Iraq War. Yeah, I knew that. Actually, it's Chinese oil companies are mainly in Iraq. They're the biggest benefactor. It's almost like we kept thinking it was a war for oil, but no, it was China. Now, I'm gonna state this. The reasons we're not going to war with Iran just yet. It may happen. I mean, this year, but I mean, the reason it didn't happen so far, and also, what would be the reaction from China and Russia? Now, on the surface, I know China and Russia would condemn that action, and it would be like they'd be trying to pull as much as the world on their side and in their favor as possible, and they'll use it as the greatest propaganda tool they possibly could. But the reality of it is that I would imagine the same exact thing that happened in Iraq would happen in Iran if there's a war and say the United States won the war and all this kind of stuff. The China would be the biggest benefactor of the oil, and Iran is sitting on the second largest amount of natural gas reserves in the world, and one of the largest oil reserves in the world. So, in reality, despite the rhetoric, if the United States went to war with Iran and it went well, China would benefit greatly, and they wouldn't do crap against anything. It's all, but the wild card is what could possibly happen or how much could it cost, because it'll be very, very. See, war is actually, besides, I know it's life and limb and pain and suffering and all the horrible things, but for the people that plan war, it's about money, economics. Can they afford it? Will it weaken their hand? Basically, the military's like pawns. And that's probably part of the reason they're holding back. But I want to point out that China probably wouldn't interfere unless the war went really bad somehow. And also Russia with Putin. Putin, his biggest source of income, he's I know people say he doesn't have anything to do with the oil industry in Russia, but that's ludicrous. Putin has major shares in the oil industry in Russia. But if there's a war in Iran, oil is going to go to 150 to probably $200 a barrel, and that's going to bring a lot of income into Russia and into Putin's pocket. A lot more. Not that he's wealthy as all hell as it is. So despite what he says, he'd be a major, major, major benefactor of it. Now, I do realize, though, if there's actually something that goes wrong, Russia and China will stick the United States in the back in 2 seconds flat. Now, I want to say something else about on the flip side with the Iran and the nuclear weapons and stuff. I said this before a bunch of times. Iran could actually avoid the whole issue about nuclear weapons versus nuclear power by using thorium. India's got a very large supply of thorium, so does Australia. Iran doesn't have that much uranium at all. They got to import it. They got very little supply of it. They got oil and natural gas. They have a very inefficient energy grid. Obviously, they're trying to make nuclear weapons. Now, I could say this. Iran is a much bigger threat than North Korea. Reason being, economics. Once Iran understands how to make nuclear weapons, they're going to make them like cookie cutters. That's the way I look at it. They got the money to do it because they got the oil and the natural gas. Whereas in the case with North Korea, they're broke. They can't even finish buildings half the time. They can't, their infrastructure's falling apart. Forget about it. Now, I'm going to point something else out because a lot of people don't realize this. The United States is sitting on the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, right? Got the biggest army and all this type of stuff. If Iranian leaders, I'm not saying Iranian people, if the Iranian leaders, the religious kooks, were sitting on that arsenal, infidels would already been nuclear crispy fried toast a long time ago. People don't want to believe that. That's exactly what would happen. It's going to take them right now a gazillion years to get there. So it's a game they're waiting on. I know. Now, if Obama wasn't in office, it was McCain. They would have already done it. They would have already attacked. In the case of Obama, he's probably got some Muslim leanings or something. I know Valerie Jarrett was his main voice in his head, basically. That's, the advisor that's been around him that pretty much screens everybody Obama sees. She was raised in Iraq. I don't know if she was born there, but she grew up there. I mean, Iran. So that has something to do with it, too. But, if Cheney was in office or McCain, forget about it. We already went to war. Those guys are maniacs. But, and also the military is against this, too. So they're catching a lot of heat from the military leaders themselves. They're against this. But, the other thing is, looking at it from purely like a chess game, it's the cost. The cost for the benefit. And that's usually why wars are, I know like people suffer a great deal and a lot of lives are lost and a lot of pain is inflicted. But usually it's about cost and willpower. That's 90% of it at least. If they deem that it's not worth it to go after Iran, sanctions are cheaper. That's why they're continuing the policy. So, but I think that policy's running out. But I think a lot of people have this major, major fear that it's going to lead to World War III. I don't think so. See, a lot of people realize what China's saying about, they got a lot of rhetoric. Russia has a lot of rhetoric about what they're saying and stuff. But just figure it out from the economic angle. If the United States won a war with Iran quickly, or pretty quickly, China is just going to benefit by the oil the same way they benefited by the oil they did in Iraq. And Russia is going to benefit by high oil prices, and Putin's going to make a lot of money when the oil prices all spike up. So, basically, I don't think it'll lead to World War III. Where it could possibly lead to World War III is if the United States does not win the way it thinks it's going to win. It's going to win. But as far as if it costs a lot of money, if a lot of major ships are sunk, there's a lot of damage and loss of life, a lot more than expected because of, shrewd maneuvers by the Iranians, then it's definitely, something that's could possibly lead to World War III because both China and Russia, if they sense weakness and they smell blood, they're going to go after it. That's how it can lead to World War III. But basically, China and Russia could care less about Iran. I just want people to remember that. They can care less. It's all bullshit. They don't give a shit about Iran. And if it's in their interest that Chinese oil companies are going to go in Iran and Putin's going to make a lot of money off of the oil prices going up, they aren't going to give a shit despite the rhetoric. So that's the reality behind it. So I'm just telling you just how it is. And, most people just don't think like that or see it that way or don't want to see it that way. But that is exactly how it is. But, I don't know. This shit's coming up pretty soon, I think. It's not going to go away. So, but just want to keep those factoids in mind. China and Russia don't give a shit about Iran. They just want world opinion on their side. And if the United States gets bloodied or weakened from a war with Iran, those two sharks will go after the United States. They ain't here to do anybody a favor. I'll tell you that. So stick with the USA. That's all I'm going to say. Just remember that.